for those who are new to Digimap for Schools, it is an online platform that allows you to view different types of maps and interact with them in a very easy way, in a very intuitive way that works very well for teachers and for students. You can do a lot of things with Digimap for Schools. You can choose different maps. You can play with historic maps, and you can add layers to your maps. You can add drawings to your maps, and you can make calculations to your maps as well. So we will mention most of those things, but as I said, if you want to see a live demonstration of how we can work through the system, you can just please feel free to join one of our Getting Started webinars, which happen every month. And if you miss the one in February, you can always get the one in March as well. So how can you use Digimap for Schools to create cross-curricular activities for your students? You can start for something that is very familiar to your students, like the school playgrounds, for example. And from there, you can start with geography. You can go through health and well-being, mathematics, physical education, science, and any other subjects, any other topics you want to talk about. For example, if you are using the Digimap for Schools to talk about science with your students, that is a very good example of a teacher who took some bug catchers and went to the playgrounds and identified some bugs with the students and where they were. And then you can go back to the classroom with the map, either a printed map from Digimap for Schools, because Digimap for Schools also allows you to print the map and bring with you, or you can just open Digimap for Schools online and manipulate the map. And that is for the very young students. They would love this activity of going back to the map, putting stars, putting markers where they saw a frog, where there was a footprint from a fox, where there was a ladybug, for example, ladybug. So there are lots of activities you can do with from the very early stages of the curriculum all the way up to the key stage 4 of the curriculum, where you can discuss environmental impact, you can recreate situations and interact with the students, create essays, also engage with literature, and discuss the environment, discuss the town planning, and what needs to be added to that place so that it would be more environmentally friendly, or that would be more economic, and so on. It depends a lot on what you are discussing with your students. We can always use a map and make it more real for the students. So of course you can discuss all those subjects without a map, but a map would make it more real. And that is very true for mathematics, for example. When you older students, you can just create calculations and functions. But if you have a map, they can see, okay, this is my school I'm calculating. I'm now trying to see the area of my school. I'm trying to create a 3D model of my school, looking at what I see in the map. That will be more enjoyable. That will be something that they can relate to. And I think the students would appreciate that much more. So let's, for example, look at geography. And if you look at the national curriculum, you can see that there are aspects of the points in the national curriculum that we can easily adapt and use with our maps, so that we will be using geography in conjunction with another subject and create a cross-curricular activity that is engaging, that is entertaining, that is interesting for your students, and also for you as a teacher as well. So for example, in the key stages 1 and 2, when the students are more about identifying places, being able to identify a map. What is a map? Is an abstract representation of what we have in our space, in our place. So you can go and look at the school and take the students to the class and then bring 2 maps that are identical, like this is the map of the school. And I have 2 different representations of this map. So they are learning geographic concepts. They are learning that what they can see when they are on the ground, they can also see from the air. They can also see in a more abstract representation of a map, like a OS map, for example. And if you go to a more advanced stage, for example, you can, for the stage 2, you can actually go a little more abstract. You can print a coloring map from the overlays in the Digimap for Schools, and then your students can go and color in and draw and identify. For example, they will identify that this polygon here is just a polygon, but it is also their school. And if they can see that, that is a brilliant way for them to learn maps, for them to learn to abstract, for them to learn geography. And then going into the cross-curricular activities, we can as well go a little deeper and compare different schools, different maps, different areas, and then start studying about the environment, studying about the cultural differences, studying about what makes this place different than the other. It's not just that the building's different, the communities is different. So there are a lot of activities that you can do in terms of social studies with the Digimap for schools, comparing two maps, comparing two schools, comparing two cities, why the city grow much faster than the other city, what make this community develop differently from other communities. So while here is just a little example of two maps you can compare. I put two schools here, but of course for your older students, key stage 3s and 4s, you will go into a deeper discussion. So you are bringing science, you are bringing environmental questions, you are bringing cultural questions, social studies, all into your geography concept, all into your understanding of the map and where things sit and where things take place in the map. So as I said, you can do many different activities, you can engage with different subjects, just using that very simple map that is the map of your school, that is the map of your area, for example. If we go for math, for example, you can do calculations, you can start very simple, like with the younger students, you can just do measurement and create a line from the school to John's house, from the school to Peter's house, from the school to Mary's house. And then they can look at the line and which line is longer. Is it shorter from my house to the school, or is it shorter from John's house to the school? For example, you can just really to understand the concept of what is bigger, what is smaller, shorter, longer, which of those buildings look small or bigger for you. And as you go advancing in the key stages, you will go for bigger measurements, for example. So all this is taken from the national curriculum themselves. So it's just a matter of identifying something that is there in the curriculum and then using it in your advantage to create a correlation to make it easier for the students to understand, because it's something that they can relate to. It's not just a concept. It's not just giving them a triangle and say, now measure the area of this triangle. It is giving that triangle and say, listen, this triangle is the shape of that monument that is in our car park. Can you measure that? And they will understand every time they look at that monument, they will remember what the measurements are. They will relate to that. And that is much easier for a child to learn if they can relate. And that's the big advantage of using maps for math, for example. And it's the same even through the key stage 3 and 4, when students are supposed to measure areas, to calculate formulas. If they are doing that for a polygon that they relate to, if they are measuring distance between two countries, if they are measuring the size of the country and the population and making all those equations, and also questions, there are some countries that are much bigger than others. However, the population is still smaller. What will interfere? So you will introduce lots of different concepts, a lot of different understandings and areas and subjects that will make your lesson much more than just calculating or just looking at the map. It will make it engaging. It will make part of a live debate, something that is there. An object in a map is never in isolation. It's always full of activities. It's full of history. It's full of dependencies. It is always in connection with something else. And that is what makes the map brilliant for creating these connections and to create an engaging and relatable activity for students. So here, what I've done is I just took a screenshot of what you'll find in Digimap for schools, just to show you that, yes, they can add markers, they can trace shapes and create polygons as we've done here. Then they can go and measure those polygons. They can create lines. They can measure those lines, they can measure distance, they can measure area, they can use the buffer tool to measure the buffer. And to, for example, if you make a line buffer along the river, you can measure risk of flooding. And then you have another series of discussions that involve science, involve community understanding and so on, and city planning. So there are lots of activities you can do, and they are all in your hands with Digimap for Schools, which I personally think is brilliant. And yeah, you can add text and measure your own image to Digimap for Schools, or you can search for images using photograph, and you can save all your activities as well, and you can print your activities and use with the students. So you can manipulate the map, you can personalize the map to what you are teaching, to what you want the students to show you that they understood as well. Now, if we go to history, for example, you can actually compare. So in the curriculum for the Key Stage 1, they say that they would like the students to understand significant historical events, people and places in their own locality. So all this is local studies from one of the parts of the national curriculum. And you can use the curriculum, you can use the phrasing and the words in the curriculum, and then go to the map and identify what it is telling you, and use that to play with your students. So they can look at the map from their locality, they can look at their town, their village. There was a battle there. Can you pinpoint in the map where this battle was? What do you think was happening? Whose house is there? Was there a house before? And things like that, that can be really engaging for the students. And for the older students, for Key Stage 3, for example, so you can study the changes over time in a town. For example, here I have Milton Keynes, and you can see that Milton Keynes used to be this little, and that is where it was. It's not even the center anymore. So that is where the same circle in the same locality, and I use the grid map so that they can also use the grid map to identify where Milton Keynes used to be. And I'm talking about the map in 1890s. So here is in 1890s, and here is the OS map, the contemporary map. So you can bring it to the more mature students and discuss with them what happened, what influenced that growth, why was it such a quick growth. I think it's one of the cities that grew the fastest in the UK and to a very large proportion. And you can talk about that. And there is a place that I find that also quite interesting in England. There is a place called Darrington, which until just before the Second World War was just a parish council and farmland, and now it's a huge place as well. And that is because the army put the barracks there, and the families of the soldiers moved to the town to be closer to them. And it affected very deeply the infrastructure of the place, because what happens now is that the place is suffering because it never had the infrastructure put in place for having arrival of people so quickly to the area. So those are discussions you can have with more mature students. So you can always compare maps, you can compare places, you can use the history to identify places in the map and to talk and discuss about that place. You can look at the length of the Hadrian Wall and then measure it and use some math with it, and then go again and look at the history and the facts and study that with your map. So all that conversation was about local maps, maps that you can have from your community, from your school, from grounds, and so on. So let's go now for a more global view of the map and interpretation and study of the map, and how we can create cross-curricular activities that will engage with that map with us. So Digimap for Schools will have a range of maps that are at global scales, and they will offer the overlays. And those overlays, they are, as you can see here, located on the left banner of your Digimap for Schools when you open it. And you will see that there are GB overlays and there are also world overlays. Here, for example, I have the world biomes, which you can use for discussing so many aspects with your students in biology, in science. So where are the forests? What type of forests are there? What influence the vegetation to be that way? Are those places colder or hotter, and what influences that as well? And here I have the map of temperature. I don't remember by heart which year, but we'll get there. So let's continue then. So for using the global map, we can use the overlays. Here I have quite a few overlays, and we have mountain range, we have population demographics. We also have the time zones for the younger students so they can understand the concept of the time zone. And we have the temperature, we have the precipitation as well. Volcanoes, which is quite popular for stage 2 and 3, because the students can first identify what volcanoes are, what tectonic plates are, and look at them and understand them. And then in a later stage, start to analyze the impact that those have on communities, on the whole population. So if we look at science, for example, so in the key stage one thing you can do, as I said, as an activity is go around and identify the same activity students can use in their playground to identify where they see bugs. They can use in a bigger map. For example, I have a 4-year-old nephew who is fascinated by animals, and he knows already in which part of the world he would find a lion. So he would say, a lion lives in Africa. He still doesn't know what Africa is, but he knows that lions live in Africa. And so that is something you can use for the younger students, is to take a map and ask them to identify which major animal would live in which part. What animals can you find in the UK, for example? Where is the UK? Let's look at that map and let's see what animals we can find. And so that would be for the younger students. And as they go along the path of the education, they will find that they can see much more. They can use the overlays in the maps to discuss deeper aspects of the world, like the climate, the biomes, the environment, and even climate change, and where we are going, what is happening. We have even some predictions on Digimap for schools, which I will show you in a minute. So for example, here is the map of the world. They can use to identify what grows where or what lives where, what the temperatures would be and how they influence what animals and what vegetation grows in each place. You can actually use the population density to work on history, to what the historic factors drove people to go where they are, or to work on biology or science to identify water supply. For example, that is a part of the curriculum that studied water. If you look at Egypt, you'll see that the whole population is going around the Nile. And then you can see how much the water influences the choice of population. So maps like these, they are really brilliant. So you can see actually, because one thing is to say, oh, the population is this or that and grew in certain way. But if you look at the map, you can actually identify the causes, you can identify the reasons, you can identify the motivation that people had to live in a place or another. You can use the word biomes to identify, again, as I said, types of animals and plants and where they live and how one influences the other, and also the digestive system, or the choice of food, the food source of those animals as well, and including the fish in the water, where they go, colder waters and warmer waters, which fish live where. So there are lots of activities you can do with science here. And then I put here 3 maps of the world temperature, which again, you can analyze with your students, and you can identify the temperature was and use the key to identify the temperature. And between 1970s and 2000, 2010 and 2018 and 2021 and 2004, a projected temperature. So that can open a lot of discussions for your students, and you can use all that within geography. So on its own, even you can combine a couple of subjects, 3, 4 subjects, if you really look at the curriculum, and then you understand that a place is not a place in isolation. But yeah, even if you just go here for geography and science, or for geography and biology, it is already an activity that is cross-curricular, that is more than just one subject, and it is quite interesting for you. Again, you can use this concept for mathematics, literature, science, history, geography, and you can also use for art and design. And one thing I found fascinating that someone told me that used the map, and the younger students, they actually cut I think was key stage 2, they cut from magazines animals and vegetation, and they tried to create a map. So this one I created here from, it is a ChatGPT one. But yeah, they could actually create that themselves. So there are, again, lots of activities you can use for art and design, and an endless source of activities that you can use with maps and map manipulation, and also to understand cultural in the architectural designs, where they are, point them out in the map. Look at the Taj Mahal in your search on Digimap for schools. Tell the students the story of it. They can try to create their own story of a monument, or try to create a monument, add to the map, and create a story about that. So there are, again, a series of activities you can use with your students. So the tools that you can use with Digimap for schools, they are mostly in this left side panel. And on the Getting Started with Digimap for Schools webinar, I can go through them one by one and show you how they work and what you can do with each of those tools as well. That is it for now, and I'm open for questions. If you have any questions, just either add to the chat or ask, and I will be happy to answer. Thank you.